This is a Willow audiobook. Ozma of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Read by Stephen Alexander. Chapter 13. The Gnome King Laughs. In a moment, the king returned to his throne and relighted his pipe, and the rest of the little band of adventurers settled themselves for another long wait. They were greatly disheartened by the failure of their girl ruler, and the knowledge that she was now an ornament in the Gnome King's palace, a dreadful, creepy place in spite of all its magnificence. Without their little leader, they did not know what to do next, and each one, down to the trembling private of the army, began to fear he would soon be more ornamental than useful. Suddenly, the Gnome King began laughing. "What's happened?" asked the Scarecrow.
"Why, your friend, the Tin Woodman, has become the funniest thing you can imagine,"
replied the king, wiping the tears of merriment from his eyes.
"No one would ever believe he could make such an amusing ornament. Next."
They gazed at each other with sinking hearts. One of the generals began to weep dolefully. "What are you crying for?" asked the Scarecrow, indignant at such a display of weakness. "He owed me 6 weeks' back pay," said the general, "and I hate to lose him." "Then you shall go and find him," declared the Scarecrow. "Me?" cried the general, greatly alarmed. "Certainly. It is your duty to follow your commander. March!" "I won't," said the general. "I'd like to, of course, but I just simply won't." The Scarecrow looked inquiringly at the Gnome King.
"Never mind,"
said the jolly monarch.
"If he doesn't care to enter the palace and make his guesses, I'll throw him into one of my fiery furnaces."
"I'll go. Of course, I'm going," yelled the general as quick as scat. "Where's the entrance? Where is it? Let me go at once." So the Gnome King escorted him into the palace and again returned to await the result. What the general did, no one can tell. But it was not long before the king called for the next victim, and a colonel was forced to try his fortune. Thus, one after another, all of the 26 officers filed into the palace and made their guesses, and became ornaments. Meantime, the king ordered refreshments to be served to those waiting, and at his command, a rudely shaped gnome entered, bearing a tray. This gnome was not unlike the others that Dorothy had seen, but he wore a heavy gold chain around his neck to show that he was the chief steward of the Gnome King, and he assumed an air of much importance, and even told His Majesty not to eat too much cake late at night, or he would be ill. Dorothy, however, was hungry, and she was not afraid of being ill, so she ate several cakes and found them good, and also she drank a cup of excellent coffee made of a richly flavoured clay, browned in the furnaces and then ground fine, and found it most refreshing, and not at all muddy. Of all the party which had started upon this adventure, the little Kansas girl was now left alone with the Scarecrow, Tick-Tock, and the private for counsellors and companions. Of course, the Cowardly Lion and the Hungry Tiger were still there, but they, having also eaten some of the cakes, had gone to sleep at one side of the cave, while upon the other side stood the Sawhorse, motionless and silent, as became a mere thing of wood. Belina had quietly walked around and picked up the crumbs of cake which had been scattered, and now, as it was long after bedtime, she tried to find some dark place in which to go to sleep. Presently, the hen espied a hollow underneath the king's rocky throne, and crept into it unnoticed. She could still hear the chattering of those around her, but it was almost dark underneath the throne, so that soon she had fallen fast asleep.
"Next,"
called the king, and the private, whose turn it was to enter the fatal palace, shook hands with Dorothy and the Scarecrow and bade them a sorrowful goodbye, and passed through the rocky portal. They waited a long time, for the private was in no hurry to become an ornament, and made his guesses very slowly. The Gnome King, who seemed to know by some magical power all that took place in his beautiful rooms of his palace, grew impatient finally, and declared he would sit up no longer.
"I love ornaments,"
said he,
"but I can wait until tomorrow to get more of them. So, as soon as that stupid private is transformed, we will all go to bed and leave the job to be finished in the morning."
"Is it so very late?" asked Dorothy.
"Why, it is after midnight,"
said the king.
"and that strikes me as being late enough. There is neither night nor day in my kingdom, because it is under the earth's surface where the sun does not shine. But we have to sleep, just the same as the upstairs people do. And for my part, I'm going to bed in a few minutes."
Indeed, it was not long after this that the private made his last guess. Of course he guessed wrongly, and of course he at once became an ornament. So the king was greatly pleased, and clapped his hands to summon his chief steward.
"Show these guests to some of the sleeping apartments,"
he commanded.
"and be quick about it, too, for I'm dreadfully sleepy myself."
"You've no business to sit up so late," replied the steward gruffly. "You'll be as cross as a griffin tomorrow morning." His Majesty made no answer to this remark, and the chief steward led Dorothy through another doorway into a long hall, from which several plain but comfortable sleeping rooms opened. The little girl was given the first room, and the Scarecrow and Tick-Tock the next, although they never slept, and the Lion and the Tiger the third. The Sawhorse hobbled after the steward into a fourth room, to stand stiffly in the centre of it until morning. Each night was rather a bore to the Scarecrow, Tick-Tock, and the Sawhorse, but they had learned from experience to pass the time patiently and quietly, since all their friends who were made of flesh had to sleep and did not like to be disturbed. When the chief steward had left them alone, the Scarecrow remarked sadly, "I am in great sorrow over the loss of my old comrade, the Tin Woodman. We have had many dangerous adventures together, and escaped them all, and now it grieves me to know he has become an ornament, and is lost to me forever."
"He was always an ornament to society,"
said Tick-Tock. "True, but now the Gnome King laughs at him, and calls him the funniest ornament in all the palace. It will hurt my poor friend's pride to be laughed at," continued the Scarecrow sadly.
"We will make rather absurd ornaments ourselves tomorrow,"
observed the machine in his monotonous voice. Just then Dorothy ran into their room in a state of great anxiety, crying, "Where's Belina? Have you seen Belina? Is she here?" "No," answered the Scarecrow. "Then what has become of her?" asked the girl. "Why, I thought she was with you," said the Scarecrow. "Yet I do not remember seeing the yellow hen since she picked up the crumbs of cake." "We must have left her in the room where the king's throne is," decided Dorothy, and at once she turned and ran down the hall to the door through which they had entered. But it was fast closed and locked on the other side, and the heavy slab of rock proved to be so thick that no sound could pass through it. So Dorothy was forced to return to her chamber. The Cowardly Lion stuck his head into her room to try to console the girl for the loss of her feathered friend. "The yellow hen is well able to take care of herself," said he, "so don't worry about her, but try to get all the sleep you can. It has been a long and weary day, and you need rest." "I'll probably get lots of rest tomorrow when I become an ornament," said Dorothy sleepily. But she lay down upon her couch nevertheless, and in spite of all her worries, was soon in the land of dreams. Chapter 14. Dorothy Tries to be Brave. Meantime, the chief steward had returned to the throne room, where he said to the king, "You are a fool to waste so much time upon these people."
"What?"
cried his majesty, in so enraged a voice that it awoke Belina, who was asleep under his throne.
"How dare you call me a fool?"
"Because I like to speak the truth," said the steward. "Why didn't you enchant them all at once, instead of allowing them to go one by one into the palace and guess which ornaments are the Queen of Ev and her children?"
"Why, you stupid rascal, it is more fun this way,"
returned the king.
"and it serves to keep me amused for a long time."
"But suppose some of them happen to guess aright," persisted the steward. "Then you would lose your old ornaments, and these new ones too."
"There is no chance of their guessing aright,"
replied the monarch with a laugh.
"How could they know that the Queen of Ev and her family are all ornaments of a royal purple colour?"
"But there are no other purple ornaments in the palace," said the steward.
"There are many other colours, however, and the purple ones are scattered throughout the rooms and are of many different shapes and sizes. Take my word for it, steward. They will never think of choosing the purple ornaments."
Belina, squatting under the throne, had listened carefully to all this talk, and now chuckled softly to herself as she heard the king disclose his secret. "Still, you are acting foolishly by running the chance," continued the steward roughly. "And it is still more foolish of you to transform all those people from Oz into green ornaments."
"I did that because they came from the Emerald City,"
replied the king.
"and I had no green ornaments in my collection until now. I think they will look quite pretty, mixed with the others. Don't you?"
The steward gave an angry grunt. "Have your own way, since you are the king," he growled. "But if you come to grief through your carelessness, remember that I told you so. If I wore the magic belt, which enables you to work all your transformations and gives you so much other power, I am sure I would make a much wiser and better king than you are."
"Oh, cease your tiresome chatter,"
commanded the king, getting angry again.
"Because you are my chief steward, you have an idea you can scold me as much as you please. But the very next time you become impudent, I will send you to work in the furnaces and get another gnome to fill your place. Now follow me to my chamber, for I am going to bed, and see that I am wakened early tomorrow morning. I want to enjoy the fun of transforming the rest of these people into ornaments."
"What colour will you make the Kansas girl?" asked the steward.
"Grey, I think,"
said his majesty. "And the scarecrow and the machine man?"
"Oh, they shall be of solid gold, because they are so ugly in real life."
Then the voices died away, and Belina knew that the king and his steward had left the room. She fixed up some of her tail feathers that were not straight, and then tucked her head under her wing again and went to sleep. In the morning, Dorothy and the lion and tiger were given their breakfast in their rooms, and afterward joined the king in his throne room. The tiger complained bitterly that he was half-starved, and begged to go into the palace and become an ornament, so that he would no longer suffer the pangs of hunger.
"Haven't you had your breakfast?"
asked the Gnome King.
"Oh, I had just a bite,"
replied the beast.
"but what good is a bite to a hungry tiger?"
"He ate 17 bowls of porridge, a platter full of fried sausages, 11 loaves of bread, and 21 mince pies," said the steward.
"What more do you want?"
demanded the king.
"A fat baby. I want a fat baby,"
said the hungry tiger.
"A nice, plump, juicy, tender, fat baby. But of course, if I had one, my conscience would not allow me to eat it. So I'll have to be an ornament and forget my hunger."
"Impossible!"
exclaimed the king.
"I'll have no clumsy beasts enter my palace to overturn and break all my pretty knickknacks. When the rest of your friends are transformed, you can return to the upper world and go about your business."
"As for that, we have no business when our friends are gone," said the lion, "so we do not care much what becomes of us."
Dorothy begged to be allowed to go first into the palace, but Tick-Tock firmly maintained that the slave should face danger before the mistress. The Scarecrow agreed with him in that, so the Gnome King opened the door for the Machine Man, who tramped into the palace to meet his fate. Then His Majesty returned to his throne and puffed his pipe so contentedly that a small cloud of smoke formed above his head. By and by he said,
"I'm sorry that there are so few of you left. Very soon now my fun will be over, and then for amusement I shall have nothing to do but admire my new ornaments."
"It seems to me," said Dorothy, "that you are not so honest as you pretend to be."
"How's that?"
asked the king. "Why, you made us think it would be easy to guess what ornaments the people of Ev were changed into."
"It is easy,"
declared the monarch,
"if one is a good guesser. But it appears that the members of your party are all poor guessers."
"What is Tick-Tock doing now?" asked the girl uneasily.
"Nothing,"
replied the king with a frown.
"He is standing perfectly still in the middle of the room."
"Oh, I expect he's run down," said Dorothy. "I forgot to wind him up this morning. How many guesses has he made?"
"All that he is allowed, except one,"
answered the king.
"Suppose you go in and wind him up, and then you can stay there and make your own guesses."
"All right," said Dorothy. "It is my turn next," declared the Scarecrow. "Why, you don't want to go away and leave me all alone, do you?" asked the girl. "Besides, if I go now, I can wind up Tick-Tock so that he can make his last guess." "Very well, then," said the Scarecrow with a sigh. "Run along, little Dorothy, and may good luck go with you." So Dorothy, trying to be brave in spite of her fears, passed through the doorway into the gorgeous rooms of the palace. The stillness of the place awed her at first, and the child drew short breaths and pressed her hand to her heart and looked all around with wondering eyes. Yes, it was a beautiful place, but enchantments lurked in every nook and corner, and she had not yet grown accustomed to the wizardries of these fairy countries, so different from the quiet and sensible commonplaces of her own native land. Slowly, she passed through several rooms, until she came upon Tick-Tock, standing motionless. It really seemed then that she had found a friend in this mysterious palace, so she hastened to wind up the Machine Man's action and speech and thoughts.
"Thank you, Dorothy,"
were his first words.
"I have now one more guess to make."
"Oh, be very careful, Tick-Tock, won't you?" cried the girl.
"Yes, but the Gnome King has us in his power, and he has set a trap for us. I fear we are all lost,"
he answered. "I fear so too," said Dorothy sadly.
"If Smith and Tinker had given me a guessing clockwork attachment,"
continued Tick-Tock,
"I might have defied the Gnome King. But my thoughts are plain and simple, and are not of much use in this case."
"Do the best you can," said Dorothy encouragingly. "And if you fail, I will watch and see what shape you are changed into." So Tick-Tock touched a yellow glass vase that had daisies painted on one side, and he spoke at the same time the word
"Ev."
In a flash, the Machine Man had disappeared, and although the girl looked quickly in every direction, she could not tell which of the many ornaments the room contained had a moment before been her faithful friend and servant. So all she could do was to accept the hopeless task set her, and make her guesses, and abide by the result. "It can't hurt very much," she thought, "for I haven't heard any of them scream or cry out, not even the poor officers. Dear me. I wonder if Uncle Henry or Aunt Em will ever know I've become an ornament in the Gnome King's palace and must stand forever and ever in one place and look pretty, except when I'm moved to be dusted. It isn't the way I thought I'd turn out at all, but I suppose it can't be helped." She walked through all the rooms once more and examined with care all the objects they contained. But there were so many they bewildered her, and she decided, after all, as Ozma had done, that it could be only guesswork at the best, and that the chances were much against her guessing right. Timidly, she touched an alabaster bowl and said, "Ev." "That's one failure anyhow," she thought. "But how am I to know which thing is enchanted and which is not?" Next, she touched the image of a purple kitten that stood on the corner of a mantel. And, as she pronounced the word, "Ev," the kitten disappeared, and a pretty fair-haired boy stood beside her. At the same time, a bell rang somewhere in the distance. And as Dorothy started back, partly in surprise and partly in joy, the little one exclaimed, "Where am I? And who are you? And what has happened to me?" "Well, I declare," said Dorothy. "I've really done it." "Done what?" asked the boy. "Saved myself from being an ornament," replied the girl with a laugh, "and saved you from being forever a purple kitten." "A purple kitten?" he repeated. "There is no such thing." "I know," she answered, "but there was a minute ago. Don't you remember standing on a corner of the mantel?" "Of course not. I am a Prince of Ev, and my name is Evring," the little one announced proudly. "But my father, the king, sold my mother and all her children to the cruel ruler of the gnomes, and after that I remember nothing at all." "A purple kitten can't be expected to remember, Evring," said Dorothy. "But now you are yourself again, and I'm going to try to save some of your brothers and sisters, and perhaps your mother as well. So come with me." She seized the child's hand and eagerly hurried here and there, trying to decide which object to choose next. The third guess was another failure, and so was the fourth and the fifth. Little Evring could not imagine what she was doing, but he trotted along beside her very willingly, for he liked the new companion he had found. Dorothy's further quest proved unsuccessful, but after her first disappointment was over, the little girl was filled with joy and thankfulness to think that after all she had been able to save one member of the royal family of Ev, and could restore the little prince to his sorrowing country. Now she might return to the terrible Gnome King in safety, carrying with her the prize she had won in the person of the fair-haired boy. So she retraced her steps until she found the entrance to the palace, and as she approached, the massive doors of rock opened of their own accord, allowing both Dorothy and Evring to pass the portals and enter the throne room. Hi, this is just a really quick reminder that if you're enjoying the stories on Willow Audiobooks, it would mean the absolute world to me if you'd consider becoming a patron on Patreon. There are 3 different pledge tiers, all with different perks attached to them, and above all, you'd be helping me to make sure I can keep doing this consistently. So please head on over to patreon.com/Willow Audiobooks and check out how you can get involved. Alternatively, I also really appreciate ratings and reviews left on iTunes or wherever you happen to get your podcasts. So if you haven't done that, please do. Thank you so much. Chapter 15. Belina Frightens the Gnome King. Now when Dorothy had entered the palace to make her guesses, and the Scarecrow was left with the Gnome King, the two sat in moody silence for several minutes. Then the monarch exclaimed in a tone of satisfaction,
"Very good."
"Who is very good?" asked the Scarecrow.
"The Machine Man. He won't need to be wound up anymore, for he has now become a very neat ornament. Very neat indeed."
"How about Dorothy?" the Scarecrow inquired.
"Oh, she will begin to guess pretty soon,"
said the king cheerfully.
And then she will join my collection, and it will be your turn.
The good Scarecrow was much distressed by the thought that his little friend was about to suffer the fate of Ozma and the rest of their party. But while he sat in gloomy reverie, a shrill voice suddenly cried. The Gnome King nearly jumped off his seat, he was so startled.
Good gracious! What's that?
He yelled. Why, it's Belina, said the Scarecrow.
What do you mean by making a noise like that?
Shouted the king angrily, as the yellow hen came from under the throne and strutted proudly about the room. I've got a right to cackle, I guess, replied Belina. I've just laid my egg.
What? Laid an egg? In my throne room? How dare you do such a thing?
Asked the king, in a voice of fury. I lay eggs wherever I happen to be, said the hen, ruffling her feathers and then shaking them into place.
But thunderation! Don't you know that eggs are poison?
Roared the king, while his rock-coloured eyes stuck out in great terror. Poison? Well, I declare, said Belina indignantly. I'll have you know all my eggs are warranted strictly fresh and up-to-date. Poison indeed.
You don't understand,
retorted the little monarch nervously.
Eggs belong only to the outside world, to the world on the Earth's surface, where you came from. Here, in my underground kingdom, they are rank poison, as I said, and we gnomes can't bear them around.
Well, you'll have to bear this one around, declared Belina, for I've laid it.
Where?
Asked the king. Under your throne, said the hen. The king jumped 3 feet into the air, so anxious was he to get away from the throne.
Take it away! Take it away at once! He shouted.
I can't, said Belina. I haven't any hands. I'll take the egg, said the Scarecrow. I'm making a collection of Belina's eggs. There's one in my pocket now that she laid yesterday. Hearing this, the monarch hastened to put a good distance between himself and the Scarecrow, who was about to reach under the throne for the egg, when the hen suddenly cried, Stop! What's wrong? Asked the Scarecrow. Don't take the egg unless the king will allow me to enter the palace and guess as the others have done, said Belina.
Pshaw,
returned the king.
You're only a hen. How could you guess my enchantments?
I can try, I suppose, said Belina. And if I fail, you'll have another ornament.
A pretty ornament you'd make, wouldn't you?
Growled the king.
But you shall have your way. It will properly punish you for daring to lay an egg in my presence. After the Scarecrow is enchanted, you shall follow him into the palace. But how will you touch the objects?
With my claws, said the hen, and I can speak the word Ev as plainly as anyone. Also, I must have the right to guess the enchantments of my friends, and to release them if I succeed.
Very well,
said the king.
You have my promise.
Then, said Belina to the Scarecrow, you may get the egg. He knelt down and reached underneath the throne and found the egg, which he placed in another pocket of his jacket, fearing that if both eggs were in one pocket, they would knock together and get broken. Just then, a bell above the throne rang briskly, and the king gave another nervous jump.
Well, well,
said he, with a rueful face.
The girl has actually done it.
Done what? Asked the Scarecrow.
She has made one guess that is right, and broken one of my neatest enchantments. By rickety, it's too bad. I never thought she would do it.
Do I understand that she will now return to us in safety? Inquired the Scarecrow, joyfully wrinkling his painted face into a broad smile.
Of course,
said the king, fretfully pacing up and down the room.
I always keep my promises, no matter how foolish they are. But I shall make an ornament of the yellow hen to replace the one I have just lost.
Perhaps you will, and perhaps you won't, murmured Belina calmly. I may surprise you by guessing right.
Guessing right?
Snapped the king.
How could you guess right when your betters have failed, you stupid fowl?
Belina did not care to answer this question, and a moment later the doors flew open and Dorothy entered, leading the little Prince Evering by the hand. The Scarecrow welcomed the girl with a close embrace, and he would have embraced Evering too in his delight. But the little prince was shy and shrank away from the painted Scarecrow because he did not yet know his many excellent qualities. But there was little time for the friends to talk, because the Scarecrow must now enter the palace. Dorothy's success had greatly encouraged him, and they both hoped he would manage to make at least one correct guess. However, he proved as unfortunate as the others except Dorothy, and although he took a good deal of time to select his objects, not one did the poor Scarecrow guess aright. So he became a solid gold card receiver, and the beautiful but terrible palace awaited its next visitor.
It's all over,
remarked the king with a sigh of satisfaction.
And it has been a very amusing performance, except for the one good guess the Kansas girl made. I am richer by a great many pretty ornaments.
It's my turn now, said Belina briskly.
Oh, I'd forgotten you,
said the king.
But you needn't go if you don't wish to. I will be generous and let you off.
No, you won't, replied the hen. I insist upon having my guesses, as you promised.
Then go ahead, you absurd feathered fool,
grumbled the king. And he caused the opening that led to the palace to appear once more. Don't go, Belina, said Dorothy earnestly. It isn't easy to guess those ornaments, and only luck saved me from becoming one myself. Stay with me, and we'll go back to the land of Ev together. I'm sure this little prince will give us a home. Indeed I will, said Evering with much dignity. Oh, don't worry, my dear, cried Belina, with a cluck that was meant for a laugh. I may not be human, but I'm no fool if I am a chicken. Oh, Belina, said Dorothy, you haven't been a chicken in a long time. Not since you've been grown up. Perhaps that's true, answered Belina thoughtfully. But if a Kansas farmer sold me to someone, what would he call me? A hen or a chicken? You are not a Kansas farmer, Belina, replied the girl. And you said, never mind that, Dorothy. I'm going. I won't say goodbye, because I'm coming back. Keep up your courage, for I'll see you a little later. Then Belina gave several loud cluck-clucks that seemed to make the fat little king more nervous than ever, and marched through the entrance into the enchanted palace.
I hope I've seen the last of that bird,
declared the monarch, seating himself again in his throne and mopping the perspiration from his forehead with his rock-coloured handkerchief.
Hens are bothersome enough at their best, but when they can talk, they're simply dreadful.
Belina's my friend, said Dorothy quietly. She may not always be exactly polite, but she means well, I'm sure. Chapter 16. Purple, Green and Gold. The yellow hen, stepping high and with an air of vast importance, walked slowly over the rich velvet carpets of the splendid palace, examining everything she met with her sharp little eyes. Belina had a right to feel important, for she alone shared the Gnome King's secret, and knew how to tell the objects that were transformations from those that had never been alive. She was very sure that her guesses would be correct, but before she began to make them, she was curious to behold all the magnificence of this underground palace, which was perhaps one of the most splendid and beautiful places in any fairyland. As she went through the rooms, she counted the purple ornaments, and although some were small and hidden in queer places, Belina spied them all, and found the entire 10 scattered about the various rooms. The green ornaments she did not bother to count, for she thought she could find them all when the time came. Finally, having made a survey of the entire palace and enjoyed its splendour, the yellow hen returned to one of the rooms where she had noticed a large purple footstool. She placed a claw upon this and said, "Ev." And at once the footstool vanished, and a lovely lady, tall and slender and most beautifully robed, stood before her. The lady's eyes were round with astonishment for a moment, for she could not remember her transformation, nor imagine what had restored her to life. "Good morning, ma'am," said Belina in her sharp voice. "You're looking quite well, considering your age." "Who speaks?" demanded the Queen of Ev, drawing herself up proudly. "Why, my name's Bill by rights," answered the hen, who was now perched upon the back of a chair, "although Dorothy has put scallops on it and made it Belina. But the name doesn't matter. I've saved you from the Gnome King, and you are a slave no longer." "Then I thank you for the gracious favour," said the Queen, with a graceful courtesy. "But my children? Tell me, I beg of you, where are my children?" And she clasped her hands in anxious entreaty. "Don't worry," advised Belina, pecking at a tiny bug that was crawling over the chair back. "Just at present they are out of mischief and perfectly safe, for they can't even wiggle." "What mean you, O kindly stranger?" asked the Queen, striving to repress her anxiety. "They're enchanted," said Belina, "just as you have been. All, that is, except the little fellow Dorothy picked out. And the chances are that they've been good boys and girls for some time, because they couldn't help it." "Oh, my poor darlings!" cried the Queen with a sob of anguish. "Not at all," returned the hen. "Don't let their condition make you unhappy, ma'am, because I'll soon have them crowding round to bother and worry you as naturally as ever. Come with me, if you please, and I'll show you how pretty they look." She flew down from her perch and walked into the next room, the Queen following. As she passed a low table, a small green grasshopper caught her eye, and instantly Belina pounced upon it and snapped it up in her sharp bill. For grasshoppers are a favourite food with hens, and they usually must be caught quickly before they can hop away. It might easily have been the end of Ozma of Oz, had she been a real grasshopper instead of an emerald one. But Belina found the grasshopper hard and lifeless, and suspecting it was not good to eat, she quickly dropped it instead of letting it slide down her throat. "I might have known better," she muttered to herself, "for where there is no grass, there can be no live grasshoppers. This is probably one of the king's transformations." A moment later, she approached one of the purple ornaments, and while the Queen watched her curiously, the hen broke the Gnome King's enchantment, and a sweet-faced girl, whose golden hair fell in a cloud over her shoulders, stood beside them. "Ivana!" cried the Queen. "My own Ivana!" And she clasped the girl to her bosom and covered her face with kisses. "That's all right," said Belina contentedly. "Am I a good guesser, Mr. Gnome King? Well, I guess." Then she disenchanted another girl, whom the Queen addressed as Evrose, and afterwards a boy named Evado, who was older than his brother Evring. Indeed, the yellow hen kept the good Queen exclaiming and embracing for some time, until 5 princesses and 4 princes, all looking very much alike except for the difference in size, stood in a row beside their happy mother. The princesses were named Ivana, Evrose, Evella, Everine, and Evedna, while the princes were Evrob, Evington, Evado, and Evroland. Of these, Evado was the eldest, and would inherit his father's throne and be crowned King of Ev when he returned to his own country. He was a grave and quiet youth, and would doubtless rule his people wisely and with justice. Belina, having restored all of the royal family of Ev to their proper forms, now began to select the green ornaments which were the transformations of the people of Oz. She had little trouble in finding these, and before long all the 26 officers, as well as the private, were gathered around the yellow hen, joyfully congratulating her upon their release. The 37 people who were now alive in the rooms of the palace knew very well that they owed their freedom to the cleverness of the yellow hen, and they were earnest in thanking her for saving them from the magic of the Gnome King. "Now," said Belina, "I must find Ozma. She is sure to be here somewhere, and of course she is green, being from Oz. So look around, you stupid soldiers, and help me in my search." For a while, however, they could discover nothing more that was green. But the Queen, who had kissed all her 9 children once more, and could now find time to take an interest in what was going on, said to the hen, "Mayhap, my gentle friend, it is the grasshopper whom you seek." "Of course, it's the grasshopper!" exclaimed Belina. "I declare, I'm nearly as stupid as these brave soldiers. Wait here for me, and I'll go back and get it." So she went into the room where she had seen the grasshopper, and presently Ozma of Oz, as lovely and dainty as ever, entered and approached the Queen of Ev, greeting her as one high-born princess greets another. "But where are my friends, the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman?" asked the girl ruler, when these courtesies had been exchanged. "I'll hunt them up," replied Belina. "The Scarecrow is solid gold, and so is Tick-Tock. But I don't exactly know what the Tin Woodman is, because the Gnome King said he had been transformed into something funny." Ozma eagerly assisted the hen in her quest, and soon the Scarecrow and the Machine Man, being ornaments of shining gold, were discovered and restored to their accustomed forms. But, search as they might, in no place could they find a funny ornament that might be the transformation of the Tin Woodman. "Only one thing can be done," said Ozma at last, "and that is to return to the Gnome King and oblige him to tell us what has become of our friend." "Perhaps he won't," suggested Belina. "He must," returned Ozma firmly. "The king has not treated us honestly, for under the mask of fairness and good nature he entrapped us all, and we would have been forever enchanted had not our wise and clever friend, the Yellow Hen, found a way to save us." "The king is a villain," declared the Scarecrow. "His laugh is worse than another man's frown," said the private with a shudder.
"I thought he was honest, but I was mistaken,"
remarked Tick-Tock.
"My thoughts are usually correct, but it is Smith and Tinker's fault if they sometimes go wrong or do not work properly."
"Smith and Tinker made a very good job of you," said Ozma kindly. "I do not think they should be blamed if you are not quite perfect."
"Thank you,"
replied Tick-Tock. "Then," said Belina in her brisk little voice, "let us all go back to the Gnome King and see what he has to say for himself." So they started for the entrance, Ozma going first, with the Queen and her train of little princes and princesses following. Then came Tick-Tock and the Scarecrow with Belina perched upon his straw-stuffed shoulder. The 27 officers and the private brought up the rear. As they reached the hall, the doors flew open before them. But then, they all stopped and stared into the domed cavern, with faces of astonishment and dismay. For the room was filled with the mail-clad warriors of the Gnome King, rank after rank standing in orderly array. The electric lights upon their brows gleamed brightly. Their battle axes were poised as if to strike down their foes. Yet they remained motionless as statues, awaiting the word of command. And, in the centre of this terrible army, sat the little king upon his throne of rock. But he neither smiled nor laughed. Instead, his face was distorted with rage, and most dreadful to behold. To stay updated with Willow Audiobooks, you can follow us on social media. Just search for Willow Audiobooks on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. Or you can visit our webpage at stephenalexanderwillis.com/Willow Audiobooks. If you're enjoying this audiobook, why not leave a rating or a review on iTunes or wherever you happen to get your podcasts?